This episode is brought to you by the Rainbow Sports Group. The Rainbow Sports Group are a leading football infrastructure platform looking to discover and nurture the best young African talent. They not only provide academies to develop the football talent, but also provide high school programs and mentoring of the pressures and pitfalls of professional football from top pros still embedded in the game. Rainbow's infrastructure allows players to be placed in a global football ecosystem with the full support throughout their career. For more information, visit rainbow-sports.com.
This is the Glenn Hoddle Footy Show. I'm Glenn Hoddle.
Welcome to the Glenn Hoddle Footy Show. Episodes are released on Sunday evenings, and we hope you will join us every week. On today's podcast, Glenn chats about the weekend highlights in the Premier League. We celebrate Pele's 80th birthday with author Harry Harris, and hear part 2 of our interview with the Rainbow Sports CEO Kingsley Pungong, asking if an African nation can ever win the World Cup. But first, let's look back to the weekend's action.
Here are the headlines.
Everton stay top of the league on goal difference after losing 2-0 at Southampton. Liverpool share top spot on points after coming from a goal down to beat Sheffield United 2-1. Patrick Bamford scored his first hat-trick for Leeds in a 3-0 win at Aston Villa, and Crystal Palace won 2-1 at Fulham to ensure the West London team stay bottom of the Premier League. West Ham, Manchester City, Wolves and Newcastle all ended in score draws, whilst Manchester United and Chelsea fought out a goalless game at Old Trafford. Well, Glenn, it's a crazy league table, isn't it, so far this season? But Leeds were great. 3-0 win at Villa under the very unique eye of their coach, Bielsa.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to say Leeds they've hit the Premier League this year, made it a better league, I've got to say, and even a harder league because they are taking points away from people. Villa, on a high. You could only say that Leeds were going to Villa at the worst time in many ways, that they were confident, had a lot of belief about themselves. You could also say it was waiting to happen, maybe, Villa at the top for the length of time they've been. So, it was either going to go one way or the other. And I thought first half it was nip and tuck, to be honest. Villa had a lot of chances and might have took the lead on numerous occasions. But you know what, Bielsa he's just one of those managers that just wants to play the same way. Attacking way. He wants to press hard. He wants to play the same shape, but he'll push forward people and press the ball so high and so hard. For almost, he tries to make it happen for 90 minutes, and that's where he uses the substitutes shrewdly. I thought it was very shrewd actually this weekend with taking Strud off. Is it Strud, the Dutch guy?
Pascal Struck, the Dutch guy, yeah.
21 minutes, it got booked. He'd almost got a second booking. I thought it was probably a booking, really. Could have got a red card there. And it was a really good decision, astute decision from the manager to bring him off as early as he did. And that set it up nicely for a really good second half. Leeds' performance was excellent, And I've got to say, Bamford, his hat-trick was top quality. It really was, particularly the second and the third were fabulous goals. They really were because he sort of manufactured them himself, and he's showing good quality. The boy, he really is playing with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I've got to hold my hands up and say I didn't think he was going to be good enough to make it in the Premier League. He'd had a few chances, I guess. He'd done really well in the Championship, and I just felt he was one of those players that was going to score goals in the Championship, but find it hard. And to score 3, I mean, you could have 3 tap-ins and be a hero, but he didn't, did he? He had a tap-in to start with pretty much. But the second and third goals were of top quality, shows his confidence, and he shows he's loving his football, and he's found a manager who believes in him.
Well, he's certainly found a manager that believes in him, and I think he's rewarding him with the goals that he's got. But I think what you've got to say as well is that before he scored any of his hat-trick, he had two really good chances as well that he might have put in the back of the net then. He could have ended up with a hat-trick much quicker or ended up with 5. But, I mean, I like every centre-forward loves to score goals in a 6-yard box tap-in. They're the ones that, they just adore those because they come around, and if you're there and you can tap them in, they're the easier type of goals. He still had a lot to do. But the second and third was total great ability with his feet. It really was opportunities, the second. And then, the third one was excellent, the way he manufactured the ball. But, I thought Bamford was probably like a lot of players. There are a lot of players that you've sensed that over the years I've seen them, and I thought Bamford might be like this, but he's proving everybody wrong. You get players that are in between Championship and Premier League. There's almost like they need a league in between. And I thought that about Bamford over the last 4 or 5 years, but he's 27 now and he's hitting his peak. So maybe it's all dropping into him. And as you say, you got a manager believing in you, you've got teammates that are believing in you. And every time he goes into the penalty area now, I think there's a big difference. I think for a few years now, I see him going into the penalty area hoping to score. And I think he goes into the penalty area believing he's going to score. And that is a massive difference, for any striker.
Leeds are up to 4th in the league on 10 points, just 3 points behind Everton and Liverpool. They're the top 2 at the moment. Great to be in Merseyside at the moment. I know you were at the West Ham Manchester City game on Saturday lunchtime. It's been a great set of results for David Moyes recently, hasn't it? I mean, really, they're coming back from that 3-0 down at Tottenham and then a 1-1 draw against Man City. And they held their own, I thought. I
think they've shown some really good character. This team, because they had some indifferent performances and results early on. Newcastle was one, beating them at home. And you think to yourself, this is going to be a long, hard winter for West Ham. But then they go and beat Leicester away 3-0. And then, they get the results. They beat Wolves, who are a good side, 4-0 at home. So suddenly the character is coming out, not only the ability, but they're showing real skill. And then, they're playing against Man City, who are a fantastic team, and they had lots of possession. But they were so dogged in the way they defended as a team. And consequently, City was finding it hard to break them down, particularly for a long period in the game. And then, they go ahead and you just think, can they ride this storm? They had a little bit of belief about themselves. They've scored a wonder goal in Antonio's goal. And I think if Antonio hadn't gone off, early in the second half through injury, they needed the second. I was watching the game, I was doing the game for BT, and I'm thinking they need a second to get through this game because City were coming at them and they were coming at them. And it was inevitable they were going to create a few chances. It was whether they could take them chances. And the lad Foden popped up, came on from the bench and was very impressive and got the equaliser. But, another season, another West Ham team, different West Ham team would have folded and they'd have lost that game 2-1 from a game where they worked so hard as a collective team and they put their bodies on the line in the end. And the goalkeeper, Fabianski, made some good saves. And it was a real show of character. And, they've ended up getting that point. City are not quite functioning. They don't, they look a little bit down from where they know they can go, but they normally play that type of game and end up winning, getting 3 points. But they've still got some work to do, I've got to say.
Yeah, there's no Silva there anymore. De Bruyne is not quite fit again. They just haven't got that massive creativity that they've shown over the past few years. They're down in 13th place at the moment after week 6 in the Premier League. They've got just 8 points. It's the worst start they've had for many years. Now, I know that the league's really crazy. It's Everton, Liverpool, Villa, Leeds, Southampton. We'll come to Southampton in a moment after their win against Everton. It's a crazy league this year, isn't it? But you think Liverpool, right up there, haven't really played their best football. They're still at the top.
Yeah, I was talking to you earlier and I said, look, we said a few weeks ago that I thought it was going to be the most difficult Premier League ever. And I think it's going to pan out that way. Everyone's taking points from everyone else. I felt Southampton would beat Everton today. I just had a feeling they'd been playing really well, Southampton. Another team that have showed great character. But there's all these teams are taking points off each other. But there is one solid team that are not really played anywhere near their top form yet is Liverpool, and they keep winning, and they're joint top of the league, and that's not a good sign for the rest of the teams in the Premier League, because when they do start hitting their straps, they're going to be formidable. But everyone was saying, well, without Van Dijk, yes, without Van Dijk, it's going to be more difficult for sure. But for me, Fabinho has gone back into that back four and played exceedingly well. He played excellent against Ajax. I watched the game against Ajax in the week in the Champions League. He was outstanding. And I think they've found somebody that, they might need to go and get another centre-back just for numbers if Van Dijk isn't back in the new year. But Fabinho has been excellent. He really has. And I can see that he can do the job for them. So, yeah, they're not really playing at their full-flushed best yet, but they're joint top of the league with their big rivals Everton, which that hasn't been spoken about for many, many years, is it? The two Liverpool Merseyside teams top of the league.
Absolutely not. That's been a while, hasn't it? In the 80s, I'd imagine that was when that last happened. Southampton, well, we'll talk about Danny Ings in a moment. Just talking about Ajax, they scraped through yesterday in Holland. I don't know if you saw this result. 13-0 away from home at Venlo. 13-0, and it was only 4-0 at half-time. So they're not in form.
Well, Venlo are probably the lowest they've ever been.
They are now.
After you can just imagine players and manager waking up the next morning, because that's when it hits you worst as a manager and a player, is you wake up next morning and you sort of think, was that a dream? Was that a nightmare I've just had? Did we really get beat 13-0? But it just shows you a little bit of, how weak the Dutch league is, to be quite honest. But no, any game of football, to score 13 goals, even if it's a under eights game, it's a tough thing to do. So I tip my hat to Ajax.
You managers, you'll take any victory, no matter who it's against. I don't know. Yeah, you're just in the killer instinct. What about Danny Ings? He didn't score today. He was man of the match. He had made 2 assists though. So when he's not scoring, he's making assists. How good has he really been this season for Southampton? He's
been absolutely brilliant. He really has, because you say, I look back and I covered the game when Tottenham beat them Saints 5-2, and it was like, where do they go from there? They can't continue to defend how they were defending. And to be fair, they've put that right. Hassan Hootel must have watched that video and said, look, we can't defend like this against top teams. They're going to kill us. And he's since then, they've again shown a lot of character, similar to what they did last year. They got beat 9-0 at home against Leicester. And then you had to look at their response was wonderful. And again, they've had a bit of a hiding at home, be it not in front of their own fans, but against Tottenham. And then suddenly they've turned, they went away and they've got results, and they've looked a good side. And this is one of the teams, like Wolves have done it in the last few years. Leeds are doing it. I think, Southampton, Villa are doing it this year. Everton has certainly done it. And you can put Southampton in this little mini league of teams that are just going to turn people over left, right and centre. And they're going to have their times when they're going to lose matches and they'll be inconsistent. But it's an inconsistent league this year. But I think there's about 4 teams there that you're always going to be looking at and going, wow, you're not quite sure. Southampton go to Man United, or they go to whoever, Liverpool maybe away and Tottenham away, and they go to Chelsea, and they'll turn teams over. And at the end of the day, they get a point at Stamford Bridge. So they're a side that have got some exciting players. But when you've got Danny Ings in there creating and scoring goals, you have always got a chance. Even if you're a team that defend, you're looking to your striker. But they're not a team like that. They'll play expansive football and they'll take you on. And I think it's refreshing to see. There's a lot of teams in the league at the moment that are playing that way. And that's why I think it really is a fabulous league this year, the Premier League.
This episode is brought to you by Rainbow Sports Group. Rainbow Sports Group are a leading football infrastructure platform looking to discover and nurture the best young African talent. The CEO, Kingsley Pungong, is an agent, club owner, academy owner, and a huge investor in promoting African football. He sees philanthropy as part of his business model and is intent on leaving a lasting legacy for African football. For more information, visit rainbow-sports.com. You're listening to the Glenn Hoddle Footy Show podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with Glenn, this is how to do it.
To get in touch with Glenn with a question for a future Footy Show podcast, you can email glenn@midnightuk.co.uk or send a tweet to @midnightmix.
Time to look forward to some of the games that are coming up. We've had a review of the weekend with Glenn. On Monday night, Burnley Spurs. Well, what a clash of characters that is. Sean Dyche, Jose Mourinho, very similar, not. How's that going to end up? Is it going to be a really tight game? Will Burnley just try and stop Spurs from scoring, or will Spurs just go out there and win it anyway?
Well, I think Spurs will be confident enough and feel they've got a strong enough squad and the changes from the bench or whatever to win the game. They'll go there to win. But, it is a test up there. There's no doubt about it, without crowd or with crowd. It is a test going up there, and Spurs. There's been results that have gone against Tottenham. It's a sort of place where they find it tough, so they're going to have to perform to their very, very best. Even though Burnley are not like they were a few years ago, where that fixture up there, anyone going there really had to, play to a 9 out of 10 to get any sort of result. Yes, of course, Spurs have got to play well to get the result. But, Burnley have got to look at themselves in the mirror and say, look, we're not clicking as well as we know we could have done or have been in the past. They're striving for that. Sean Dyche is trying to get that formula back again. There's been a bit of unrest, about ownership and this and that off the pitch. But it's a tough fixture. Whenever you play Burnley away from home, it's a tough fixture. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. And you know what? The way the results have gone this pre-season, this Premier League this season, it could be one where Spurs, if they don't watch it, could get turned over.
And how frustrating is that as a manager? Sean Dyche has come out and said, look, I really need reinforcements. He's had a little bit of arguments with the owner, trying to get some money in the finances. It was kind of, you have to sell one first to get one in, which is really this, defeating the object, isn't it? How tough is it when you're the manager? You need a player or two, but you can't get them into the club.
Yeah, that is extremely tough for them because, this Premier League, as I'm saying, there's a lot of these other teams that are using the Premier League money to strengthen their squads. And that's what's happening. Everton, Wolves have done it over the last few seasons. Well, this season as well. Southampton, Villa have recruited well. He's seeing all these teams around him recruiting well, and they're looking as if they're getting stronger and stronger. Yet you just feel that Burnley at the moment have stood still. Now I think with Sean and the players they've got there, when they get back to playing to the way they normally played, I think they've got enough to stay up. I think they'll have enough to stay up. But the last few seasons that they were in Europe, weren't they? 2 seasons ago?
Yeah.
So, they're used to something a little bit more than just survival. But I do believe they'll survive. Even if there's no money given available to them at the moment. But in a way, in the Premier League, this sort of era, that shouldn't happen. This money should be spent as well on the squad and strengthening your squad. And I feel for Sean Dyche, and I think he'll get it right. I think he'll get it right in the sense that they'll stay up. But I think it's going to be a bit of a dogfight for him this year.
The highlight game, the headline game on next weekend is the Sunday match at Old Trafford, Manchester United Arsenal. I imagine Danny van der Beek would just decided he wants to go back to play with Ajax and make it 14 and 15 though, because he's not getting on the pitch at the moment. He's not even getting on for 10 or 15 minutes. You always said it was a strange signing because they don't really need a midfielder. They need a defender. How do they cope with Arsenal? They cope with Chelsea to a degree in the 0-0 draw this weekend. How do they cope with Arsenal, who are fairly much resurgent under Arteta?
Yeah, it's always a good fixture and always a big fixture over the years when you've got Vieira and Keane fighting against each other in midfield and Keown jumping all over, if you remember. Van Nistelrooy, yeah. So there's a bit of history, put it that way. Righty's tackle on Schmeichel, I remember. I was covering that game. So there is a bit of history there, but I think both them teams are a long, long way off those sort of teams I've just spoken about, and those individuals that were playing in them teams. With Man United at the moment, and it's a concern for Man United fans. They've had to probably look at this for sort of 2-3 seasons, maybe more, probably more, since Fergie was there really as manager, is that they don't quite know what they're going to get. In every game, when they go into the game, you never quite know what United are going to do and what they're going to get. PSG, they've gone across there. PSG haven't started the season that great in France, but still a hard game. They've still got world-class players. And they go over there and get a fantastic result. And you think they'll come back to Old Trafford. They'll be buoyant. They'll be up for the Chelsea game. As a home team, didn't do enough for me to win the game. Neither team did really. But you're never quite sure what United you're gonna see. They could go and turn it on. They could go and turn it on against Arsenal. But we won't really know until match kickoff time. And that's always difficult for United, because over the years, they've always been a force at home. Particularly in this sort of fixture against Arsenal, they would always be up there with an 8 or 9 out of 10 performance. But as you say, Arsenal were looking more solid. They didn't have the best of. They were a little bit fortunate in Europa. They had to put the A team on really in many ways to get the result, but they got over the line. But they're definitely improving from last year under Arteta.
To get in touch with Glenn with a question for a future Footy Show podcast, you can email Glenn at midnightuk.co.uk or send a tweet to @midnightmix.
Edson Arantes do Nascimento is 80 years old. He was on the 23rd of October. Who's that, you're saying? That, of course, is Pele. What a fantastic player he was. And if you're not old enough to have enjoyed him live or on the old TV sets in black and white in those days, just check him out on YouTube. He was fantastic. So to celebrate his 80th birthday, we've got a man on the show who knows him really well. It's author and journalist Harry Harris, who's written the book on Pele. It's a few years ago now, but it's still out there for sale, as every good book is. Harry, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, great. Thank you very much for having me.
Hello, Harry. Good for you to join us.
How are you doing? You're looking well. It's amazing. You're not on the golf course. What's going on?
That's because the lights are on, Harry. That's the only reason we managed to force him off the 18th, just as the lights went out. We gained an hour, so it's a bit darker earlier. So it's our victory is the golf course defeat. Listen, talk about Pele. You've known him for a long time. You met him many years ago, Harry, and you wrote a book on him. How was he? What kind of a man was Pele?
Well, it's just so much of a pleasure to speak to Tottenham's greatest number 10, but of course the greatest number 10 in the world is Pele, in my view. And 20 years ago, I went to see him. I've seen him all around the world, and thanks to people I've known, MasterCard and Umbro, they facilitated so many exclusive meetings with him. He kind of like, every time he came to London, to England, I was kind of like representing Fleet Street's journalists. So he kind of like saw me every time and knew me, and eventually he would sort of give me a hug and say, it's the English press, and it was just me. But 20 years ago, I had a little chat with him and said, look, I've been on holiday. In fact, I think I was in La Manga reading a book about Brazilian football, and it just occurred to me that there wasn't an awful lot in that book about Pele. And I spoke to a literary agent I had at the time, and he said, there must be hundreds of books on Pele. And the fact is, there wasn't any. There was one that he'd written in Portuguese, or had written in Portuguese for him. It had been translated to English. And when you have these things translated, they're never the same. So next time I saw him, I said, look, I'd like to write your life story. But remember, 20 years ago, he had a bit of a dip. He had a row with Havelange. He wasn't at the World Cup. He was no longer the guy on the stage presenting the trophies and doing the draws. He'd had a little dip in his country because he delved into politics. And when I said to him, look, I want to write this book, but I only want to write it if you're happy with it and you consent to it. And he stood up. So I stood up. He gave me a hug. He said, Yes, of course. He said, I don't know why anyone wants to write a book about me.
I mean, getting to that, he seems. I've met him on a couple of occasions, very quickly, just at different dues with 1010. But he seems like what you've just said there, Harry. Why would somebody want to write a book about, the great Pele? Really? He seems so humble. Was he a humble man?
Very, yes. And what struck me about him is he's small. He's just a tiny little guy. And you see these films about him where he's a World Cup goal, where he scored in a header against Italy.
Yeah.
And he was phenomenal at the back post, looked as though he couldn't get it. And he leapt so high. Reminded me of Cliff Jones. I remember him, far post coming in, tiny little guy. He used to have a great leap and score goals. That's what really struck me about him, how small he was. But he was never intimidated. He would punch his little weight, and in fact actually punched an opponent on the chin once. It was quite a physical game back then, but he was no shrinking violet.
He got badly kicked, didn't he? In the 66 World Cup, he was fouled so many times. Quite brutal in the end, really.
Yeah, well, I recall the game at Goodison against Italy. He had the ball a bit just outside the box, and the guy came in and whacked him in the shin. Down Pele went. He leapt up. He wasn't finished, the Italian guy. He went in and went straight onto his ankle and kicked him out the World Cup.
Yeah, he did. That was in 66. But, I mean, my memories of a young child was the World Cup after that in 70 in Mexico. They had a wonderful team, Brazil, possibly the best ever team that's been on the planet. It's debatable, obviously, that quote. But I remember as a kid watching him doing some things in the 70 World Cup, that was the World Cup that Gordon Banks made that wonder save from his header, and he sort of, I don't know, something stayed with those two for years and years and years after. The respect that he showed Gordon Banks, because I don't think even Pele could believe that he got across from the near post to get to the far post and to flick it like he did over the top of the bar. It was incredible. Do you remember you were reported on that game, Harry?
Not that old, Glenn. I'll tell you what he did tell me about that for the book. The Brazilian Football Association didn't want him to play in 70. He actually announced after the World Cup in England that he'd had enough of football and certainly had enough of international football and retired from playing for Brazil. But his Santos team was so magnificent, such a great club team. And people say, why didn't he ever play in Europe? Why didn't he play for Real Madrid, Juventus, or Sheffield United? In fact, I had made him an offer. But he said he had no need to do that. And they were like the Harlem Globetrotters. They went all around the world playing exhibition matches. And everyone wanted him to be playing in it. So he made a fortune playing for Santos, plus another fortune for being, actually playing in the team. So he had a separate deal for that. So he had no need to do that. But because he'd kind of like semi-retired and was just playing club football, not playing international football then was the proper stuff, and club football was just like a little hobby on the side. But he wasn't really in top condition. He was overweight. He wasn't really physically fit, not as sharp as he had been at his peak. And you can see that in pictures in the 70 World Cup. He was a bit stocky round the waist and the bottom. But I agree with Glenn. That was, for me, the greatest team that ever lived, ever performed. Yeah. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's such a balance to it, Carlos Alberto, Revellino, Gerson, Tostao. Oh, it was just every player. Jorginho, how he scored in every single game in the World Cup. Amazing team. But it was the way they played. And I remember, being a creative young player, just, in 1970, just taking it all in, just taking the whole thing in. And I remember when he did the dummy against Czechoslovakia, when he dummied the goalkeeper. And it was so sad that when he got to it and he hit it, it didn't go in. Everyone's normally forgot about it, but if that had gone in, it just sneaks past the post. But do you remember that little dummy? We've never seen anything like that. He feinted the goalkeeper, let it run round the left side of the keeper. He run round the right side, and then he got onto it, and screwed it back and tried, and it just goes wide of the post. And I remember I was just out on my sofa. I was jumping up and down, going absolutely mad about it. And then, you know, trying to score from the halfway line back then, and he just misses it, catches the goalkeeper out, all them things, you know, and obviously going on and winning the World Cup and being the talisman for that great Brazilian side. But those special things that he had was incredible as a youngster watching that.
Well, I've never seen anybody try and dummy the goalkeeper since, let alone before. And, you know, before Beckham scored from the halfway line, you know, he tried it, but not in a club game against Wimbledon, but in a World Cup final. And he was actually more than 5, 6, 7 yards in his own half. He wasn't actually on the halfway line.
Probably had a bit of help with altitude, though. Played in Mexico. God, it does fly a bit, the ball.
It does.
Rangers fans will be shouting, yeah, that Pele's not bad, but he's no Kemar Roof, is he? I mean, Kemar managed to find the net, didn't he, from the halfway line in midweek?
See that goal this week, that was sensational. I think Stevie Gerrard said, live, it's the best goal he's ever seen. And it was spectacular, I've got to say. And the pitch was like puddles on the pitch. Amazing. Did you see it, Harry? It was incredible.
Yeah. Also, Glenn, it's very interesting, of course, because you know better than me, but when Pele tried to score from 5, 6, 7 yards inside his own half, they were still playing with balls that were about 5 times the weight of the current balls.
Definitely, yeah.
So they probably had laces on them as well, didn't they?
Not quite, not there.
Or maybe that was just me growing up. Sorry, I had a flashback there.
When he was 17 and he scored in his first World Cup, they might have had laces then. But no, you make a good point there, Harry. And the pitches are not as, you know, the pitches are not great back in the day then, obviously. But no, they were things that that's what World Cups bring. Stand out skills and things that happen and goals and attempts of goals. That was, for me, looking back, it was the greatest, you know, World Cup in 1970. You know, it was probably because I was young and I got excited about it. Even outshone the 1966 World Cup for me, although England won, because of the great skills that everyone was seeing from all these great players, and no better than Pele. It was, and to think that you've written his book, and you must be very proud.
I am. It was 20 years ago, but it's been updated several times. It's been updated a couple of years ago. There's only 100 of them left, I'm told. But it's been translated around the world. In fact, it's just come out in Vietnam. So I've never had a book published in Vietnam before. So I'm really proud of that.
It's always great to catch up with you, Harry. Thanks for joining. I've got to ask you one final question. Sure. Franz Beckenbauer said that Pele was the best player in the history of football. Can we disagree with Franz Beckenbauer?
No. And Bobby Charlton said, the beautiful game has to be played by beautiful people. There was no one more beautiful than Pele.
That's great. We'll end it on that note. We cannot go better than that's a fantastic quote. And thanks very much, Harry, for joining us. Brilliant.
In episode 6, Glenn and I spoke to Kingsley Pungong. He's the CEO of the Rainbow Sports, who look to nurture young African football talent. And in the second and final part of our interview, I asked him just how difficult was it to find the best young African footballers playing in their homeland.
It's tough and competitive like everything else. It's about, as Glenn mentioned, there's a multitude of talent and this great many players who can qualify based on talent. The talent is not sufficient or adequate in itself. So we look at other qualities, and to find that top 1% is a challenge, especially in a place where you have no data, you have no statistics. More than 70% of the best players don't even play within the leagues. They just play in schools and small clubs. There is no video footage of them. So you need an extensive search. You also have to understand that Africa is almost 50% rural. And sometimes to get to the rural areas is challenging with the lack of infrastructure and access, rail, road, and air infrastructure. So it's a challenge, but in that challenge lies the opportunity. In that, because it's almost like a plain slate, and you have to work to develop it. So there's a huge amount of talent. There's a challenge in finding it, but I think the opportunity lies in the fact that there's a challenge in finding these players.
Kingsley, what's the coaching scenario? How many coaches have you got, and where are they from? Are they from Africa? Are they from?
At the moment, we have mostly African coaches, but we have European experts and scouts who work with them as well. Because we're basically a global business. We have Americans on board. We have people who do analytics who are, European as well. But on the ground, it's Africans, because we see ourselves as a Pan-African business, and I think it's also important that knowledge transfer is a big part of what we do. As we build capacity and as we build our business, we want to make sure that we exchange best practices, and the best European ideas and coaching philosophies is passed on to our African coaches who understand the mentality of the African athlete better and can transmit that in a way that is palatable. And the reason that clubs like Red Bulls failed, because they were trying to create an Austrian player in Ghana, is not possible. So we're trying to make sure that there's a balance. Also, we have a club in Czech Republic where all the entire staff are European. So it's just a balancing act, and making sure that the people on the ground who transmit knowledge do it in a local context.
Why did you feel the need to purchase football clubs? I know you own a handful. What was the requirement for that to add to Rainbow Sports?
I think it's very important, especially in Africa. You need an environment that is controlled. You need a controlled environment, because you need a philosophy. You need to teach players. We started and we realized that taking a player off the street or taking them from a small club and just placing them is a recipe for failure, because maybe that player is not ready. So we needed a platform that we control, where we can train players, we can pass on our philosophy, we could explain to them how the challenges of being a professional. So that was step number one. We also realized that you have to understand that Africa is far removed from the global ecosystem in football, because even though there's scouting activity, it doesn't happen on a consistent basis. So maybe the big European clubs travel to Africa only during particular tournaments. And we needed a way to provide a soft landing for young African players into the global ecosystem, a place where they could further continue their education, they could learn the game better, they could be in close proximity to the bigger markets, and they could gain exposure. So it's about education and exposure. And so that forced us to have a club in the Czech Republic. You also have to understand that African nations today, from a business perspective, are hugely restricted by visa requirements. And so it's not only about having an opportunity. You can have an opportunity and you don't even have the visa. So I will tell you that 60% of African players lose the opportunities to play in Europe because they don't even have a visa. And so trying to control that process where players have access to markets where they can have an opportunity, it's very powerful and important. So we wanted to build a value chain that we control, a value chain that will provide an opportunity for African athletes to train under the best conditions, but also provide a pathway into the global game. And that's a process that has to be controlled, especially if you're trying to create a business. Because in business, you really need to control several elements to be successful. And if you don't have all these in place, then you are building a very fragile model, which is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, what you're basically doing, Kingsley, which is very shrewd, and it's the right way to do it, is they're under your umbrella. They're under your development. So your coaches can encourage them. They can, somebody's job's not on the line, if you like, if you're handing them over to another club. So you're in control of that on and off the pitch, all the development football-wise. So that's a very, very shrewd and correct way to do it. Because clubs do get upset. You said 70% of these players in the end don't have the right visas. They don't, so clubs are going to not, they're not going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money and effort trying to get these players across. I went across to South Africa back in 2009, I think it was, round about then when I had my academy put together. And we watched some wonderful players at 14, 15 down there. I watched, numerous matches and I watched them training, and their skill levels, Chris, were incredible. It was like I watched the game on the most horrible surface you'll ever see. It was a dreadful surface, and both teams were technically way above anything that would have been 17 at that age. They were 14, 15. They could play one touch, they could play two touch on dreadful pitches. And the skills and the ability levels were there. How many of those kids had a chance to go through? Probably zero. But with my football eye and my experience in football, I could look at them very easily. There was probably 6 players easily I could take. We made a joke and said, "Look, can we put them in take them home with us?" Because they were proper players. They were players that you had a chance. Mentally, they had to be worked on, and whether they could go to Europe and settle in. But that is a classic case. Is if you've got that talent going into a club that's being owned by your guys as well, and your company and your coaches and your manager, then you have a magnificent chance of creating and developing these players to become the very best that they can be. I think that's the problem. It's in South Africa and in Africa, sometimes if they're just handed over at certain ages, they get lost. And the culture is different, and they need someone. And I think it's very encouraging to hear that you're doing what you're doing, in the sense of you've got this umbrella of this club that's going to look after these players, football-wise, mental-wise, off the pitch, and educate them in all sorts of different ways. And I think that's very, very good, very positive.
You mentioned South America earlier on as well, Glenn. And for Kingsley, we've seen in the South American players, it doesn't mean just a lot for them if they make it. It changes their families' lives as well. Is that similar for the African players? You just said they're coming from places that are very poor infrastructure, probably wouldn't have a lot of money in the family at all. The motivation must be there for them to change not just their own lives at a young age, but the lives of their families as well.
Absolutely. What a big reason for us to do this, obviously we're a business, but a big reason for us to do this and why we are driven and passionate about it is the social economics, the difference it makes in the life of communities, of individuals. I can go through a list of players that we brought basically from less than $50 a month in wages to now making millions of dollars. We have players making over £4-5 million a year. Who came from nothing, and they now help their families, they now educate their siblings, they now invest in their communities. And this is the power of sports. They now become enhanced lifestyle examples. They now become ambassadors for their communities, ambassadors for their countries, and it's quite powerful. So it is one of the things that drives us, and we've created we have a couple of examples which I will cite later, but what motivates us is the ability to create a platform that will produce a lot of these ambassadors for Africa. That's the way we believe the world will notice African sports and take attention and take notice of its potential.
Kingsley, that's wonderful to hear. Just ironically, just a question to you. Do any of those players that have made it as well as they have done, like you're saying, and they're earning millions of pounds now, I'm just finding it interesting to ask the question, has any of them helped with paying some money back into your academy for the next generations?
Some of them have made contributions, modest contributions. Some of them send equipment over, balls and jerseys to help the other ones coming through. Some of them even come in as mentors to see the younger ones. It's a system. It's a small family. They call each other for support and pass on their experience, which is quite powerful. We're actually working very close now. One of our athletes who's about to join a big Chinese club to build an academy in his honor, and the Chinese club is prepared to support that initiative as well. As part of what we do. So I think as the boys get mature, they also contribute into the system, which is creating the rainbow way, which is what the standard that I advocate for.
They just might need a little nudge and a little reminder every now and again.
Of course. People tend to forget fast.
What is the target? What is the end target for Rainbow? We've seen players like Kanu, JJ Okocha, Samuel Eto'o, Yaya Toure, Didier Drogba, George Weah, and of course the one and only Roger Miller all come out of Africa over the past 2 decades or so. What is the target for your company at the end? When will you sit down and have a nice cup of tea in England, but a cup of coffee in North Carolina, no doubt, probably decaf.
Don't forget your custard creams.
No custard creams. You're not getting any more biscuits, Glenn. We've been through this before. When are you going to sit down and be happy and put your slippers on? What's the target?
Our end goal is to, bring to the world Africa's greatest generation of top players. That's what we can offer football, and at the same time connecting Africa to the global ecosystem with dignity and respect. So there's a trickle-down effect. African clubs get better transfer fees. The game within Africa will have developed. Not everybody is going to play for the top leagues around the world. Africa itself will develop top leagues of its own. And I think that would be a very satisfying end goal.
Last question, Kingsley. So you said about you think that there's another generation, all them lovely players that we've seen playing in the Premier League and in Europe. You think there's even a better generation to come. Do you believe that generation can bring an African country to win the World Cup?
Yes, it's very possible in our lifetime. I think it's not an issue of quality, because you could see even in the Premier League, players like Salah, Aubameyang, these are distinguished players. I mean, Mahrez, these are tremendous world-class players. But the issue will be for Africa itself to get better in organization, in leadership. The sports administration needs to get better. The professionalism within the continent needs to get better. The leagues need to be better developed. And I think it's a combination of factors that, if all come together, then there isn't a reason why we shouldn't see an African country win the World Cup in a lifetime.
So Kingsley Pungang saying that African nation can win the World Cup, Glenn, in our lifetime. That's some statement, but it is possible. They seem to be going in the right direction with the academies, and I know you've been involved in the academy system in the past as well. Yes,
I had a very exciting project that I put together and look back on it with a lot of pride. I had my own academy for players that were released from clubs, and I think in a few weeks' time, I would love to. We're going to do probably a program about my academy, and hopefully talk to a few guys that were a part of that academy out in Spain. We took it out in Spain, so yeah, got some ideas about it. So I'm looking forward to that, Chris, to do that in a few weeks' time when we've planned it, and hopefully it'll be interesting for the listener to understand a little bit of what I believe should be done in this country and what can be done with young players that have been, released from football clubs.
I know you've got some good ideas, including sort of getting the B teams into the lower leagues as they do in Spain in the Segunda division there. Just out of a quick interest, do Barcelona and Real Madrid second teams, are they very good when they can't qualify, they can't get promoted, but are they good teams? Do they do well in the leagues?
They do, yeah. I mean, they've got talent. It's under 23 sides. Basically, that's what they use them. But that's what I want to go into in this program. So I don't want to spoil it all now. Let's save a little bit.
That's what they call a teaser. So there we go. Watch out for that. In future episodes, we'll be talking about the academy and how the young kids can really flourish in English football.
That's all for today. See you next week.